People tend to treat UFOs like they treat religion. Either you're a believer or you're not, that strange things come into our skies from outer space. The issue has been so clouded with sensationalism and emotion that it's hard to make any real sense of it. But now some scientists in Canada and America have raised a very important question. Could it be that both the believers and the disbelievers are on the wrong track? UFOs don't visit us from outer space, but they aren't optical illusions either. Instead, could it be that UFOs are created by something that actually happens on Earth?
What people see and what they report are two different things. For example, when someone says they see a UFO, that means they see a ball of light. There's no argument there. And most scientists would argue that's a ball of light. The argument is when people automatically conclude that because it's a ball of light, therefore it's a flying saucer.
It might have been just a ball of light that Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson saw in Minnesota, but it wrecked his car and knocked him unconscious for half an hour. Then there's the case of Travis Walton, a forest worker who saw a ball of light in Arizona.
We saw an object hovering near the road. A glowing disc about 25 feet in diameter. And we could see it very distinctly.
Travis Walton says he too was knocked unconscious. But even more than that, he woke up to find himself on board some kind of spacecraft with a crew of alien creatures. Both those cases involve balls of light, what some people have called UFOs or flying saucers. But where did those balls of light actually come from, and where were they formed in the first place? Well, one explanation comes from Canada, where a scientist says they don't come from outer space at all, but they come, in fact, from deep within the Earth. He says that they're related to earthquake activity.
These are unknown objects being observed in the early 1800s.
Dr. Michael Persinger prefers to believe his computer at Laurentian University rather than the people who say they've seen flying saucers. And his computer came up with some remarkable results. Look around the world, and wherever you find earthquake activity, you're likely to find UFO reports. Dr. Persinger began to wonder whether something connected with earthquakes caused those balls of light that people call UFOs.
Well, if you take a look at the data, and that's ultimately what it comes down to, the data, not what somebody believes or how they think or their basic theories. Theories are a dime a dozen. It's the data. If you look at the data, you will find a marked relationship between increases in UFO activity, or luminosities, balls of light, and later earthquake activity.
Geologists gave Dr. Persinger rare photographs of what's called earthquake lightning. The lights are believed to be electrical energy released by the breaking of rocks containing quartz. So far, all we have is a theory. Can it be proved in the laboratory? Dr. Brian Brady is a physicist at the U.S. Bureau of Mines in Denver, Colorado. His research tends to support Dr. Persinger's theory. This is where he tests quartz-bearing rocks in a machine that squeezes them until they break. Brilliant sparks of light sometimes shoot out from the rock.
Now, under certain conditions, namely when the lights are out, you can observe this thing. It behaves as a luminous arc or jet emanating from the surface of the sample.
Take this sample of granite. Steel cylinders will crush it with 150,000 pounds of pressure until it shatters. Just as the rock breaks, a time exposure photo shows that trails of light seem to streak from its surface like a fireworks display. That's what can happen in the laboratory. So these scientists argue that much bigger balls of light may well come from stresses and strains deep within the Earth.
I was on routine patrol and I was westbound here on County Road 5. I looked down in that direction and I saw a bright light, which appeared to be over the center line of the highway up here.
Back to the case of Deputy Sheriff Val Johnson. Mysterious balls of light have often been reported in Minnesota. Val Johnson saw one 3 years ago.
Didn't know what in the world it was, and thought I better go check it out. I got up here to mile marker 68, just like that. Bingo, just like that. The light was at the vehicle, and inside the vehicle I heard the sound of breaking glass, and that's the last I recall. brakes locked up apparently, and I left 99 feet of black skid marks coming to rest sideways in the northbound lane.
Val Johnson suffered only minor injuries, but was unconscious for more than half an hour. The strange damage to his car has still not been repaired, in the hope that someone someday will explain it. Dr. Brady is sure it wasn't a UFO.
I would be of the opinion that, given the conditions that Val Johnson reported, that what he observed was a luminous display and not unidentified flying object.
The theory may explain Val Johnson's case, but what of Travis Walton, that forest worker in Arizona? He described what he saw to an artist, and this is the result.
I got out and went up close for a closer look, and deciding that was a little too dangerous to be that close, I raised up to turn and go when that beam shot out of the bottom of this craft and struck me and knocked me unconscious.
Travis Walton says the Persinger theory can't explain what happened to him in the pine forest. He did see a strange light. He was hit by some kind of electrical energy, but he says he woke up on board a spacecraft facing alien creatures.
Well, they were basically humanoid in form, about 5 feet tall, and they were white-skinned, very pale white, and with a normal arrangement of features, except for very, very large eyes and no hair on their head.
To say that he's a liar would be inappropriate. He actually believes that this happened.
So if Travis Walton is not a liar, how does Dr. Persinger explain those little white men? He says the answer lies here, in the human brain. Michael Persinger is a neurobiologist. He studies the human brain. He believes that when the electrical charge struck Travis Walton, it made him hallucinate and affected his memory.
Now, this is what I think happened in Travis Walton's brain during the period of the discharge from the luminosity. The stimulation occurred here, in the hippocampal region. This is the most electrically unstable part of the brain, and when it is stimulated, you get experiences of intense meaningfulness, sensations of anxiety, dreamlike experiences, sensations of being lifted, and most of all, it interferes with memory. And that is what was influenced the following 4 to 5 days. Memory was so modified, because this is the part of the brain that consolidates or stores memory, that the individual would not know that the memory had ever been modified.
Well, it was no delusion. It's very real. Everything happened, just like you and I talking here.
It's nearly 7 years since Travis Walton and 6 other timber workers saw that light on their way home from work in the forest. Perhaps we'd all know better what really happened if his mates hadn't panicked and driven off. Travis Walton was missing for 5 days as people searched the woods for him. So who should we believe? Travis Walton or Michael Persinger? Perhaps neither. But can Dr. Persinger entirely rule out the possibility that Travis Walton did meet creatures visiting us from outer space?
What you're saying is, can you rule out anything? And my answer is no, you can't. For example, I could argue right now that we're all being urinated upon by invisible, non-physical pink elephants. And you may not like that. You may say, well, they're not there. And my answer is, prove it. Prove they're not there. And the answer is, you cannot prove a negative. It's a word game. And the reason I'm going on about this is because that particular question is used time after time by UFO enthusiasts as a reason to accept far-fetched explanations. In other words, they say, well, your theory cannot prove that they're absolutely not there, therefore, this far-fetched idea that they're from planet X is correct. Right? That's unscientific and as well as illogical type thinking.
These days, Travis Walton tries to keep his thoughts about UFOs to himself. He told us his interview for 60 Minutes will probably be the last he does, and UFOs are a forbidden subject at home.
We don't discuss it, and my children don't know anything about it because that's the sort of thing nightmares are made out of, and they've got enough boogeymen in the dark, you know, without that.
People who have got very close to luminous displays, or UFOs, especially the very bright, noisy ones, have been burned severely. They've been knocked unconscious. And that's the danger. And that's one of the reasons that concerned scientists like Dr. Brady and myself say stay away from it, all right? And what's happened is because of this myth generated that somehow UFOs are from another planet to help us and to guide us, people have a tendency to run up to them, working on the assumption that they are somehow positive. That's dangerous. The data indicate time after time that these are energetic events that can produce possible biological damage, perhaps even death at times. So my suggestion is stay away from them.
Now, this isn't really the kind of story we'd normally do, but it is absolutely fascinating. One of those wild ideas that take off and sweep around the world. It all began with a documentary that claimed the astronauts never ever landed on the moon, that the whole event was faked by the Americans, filmed on a movie set. Normally, you'd just dismiss this as another of those crazy conspiracy theories. But then you find that 20% of Americans, that's like 60 million people, actually believe there's something in it, that the giant leap for mankind could have been the hoax of the century.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Some say it was the greatest achievement of the 20th century. And looking back, it was truly amazing. Apollo 11 was a major propaganda victory for America and a major boost to national confidence. So much so that more and more people around the world now believe it was a giant confidence trick. Not one astronaut has been on the moon.
I'm afraid not.
No Apollo ever
Nope.
landed on the moon. It's all a lie.
I'm afraid so. The government lies. What a surprise.
Bart Zabrell is a documentary filmmaker, a committed Christian, and a man obsessed. He and his disciples believe all the Apollo moon landings were a conspiracy on a massive scale.
While some may say to deny the moon landings would be tantamount to denying the Holocaust, we have to realize that there were 300 million eyewitnesses to World War II. But to this supposed greatest event in human history, there were only 3 witnesses, each government employees, and there was no independent press coverage of this event. And all that we saw was a fuzzy black and white television picture.
Houston, you should have a picture now.
We have a pretty good picture now.
Now, if you think you've heard all this before, you could be right. Back in 1978, Hollywood made a movie called Capricorn 1.
Ready, slow-mo.
Houston, I'm stepping onto the surface.
Take slow-mo.
The movie was about a mission to Mars, but the landing was staged, secretly filmed on a movie set.
You have shown us what
The conspiracy theorists reckon if Hollywood could fake it, so could NASA.
I was strolling on the moon one day.
They say this famous image of the astronauts planting the American flag on the moon actually happened in an air-conditioned studio. And that's why the flag is flapping. We all know there's no wind on the moon.
You can look at the footage yourself, and it certainly looks to me like the flag is either alive or there's wind. I believe it was air conditioning because of the heat, because of the natural or artificial lighting that they had, as well as the fact that they're in spacesuits without cooling units.
And according to Bart Zabrell, there's more proof it was all a hoax. If the astronauts were really on the moon, there would be only one source of light, the sun, and therefore only one light making all the shadows.
It's 20 times brighter than the desert on Earth. There's no artificial lighting, no need for it. All shadows will run parallel. Sometimes we have 2 objects in a picture just a few feet from one another, and the shadows are going as much as 90 degrees different direction. Now that's circumstantial evidence of artificial lighting.
That's the truth.
If it was all faked, there were some tricky problems for the hoaxers. For instance, how to fake the effect of the moon's gravity. Ah, that's easy, says Bart Zabrell. Slow motion.
Look at the size of that rock.
When we take the traditional television picture as seen by NASA, it's very convincing. They seem to be kind of floating around and it looks like 1/6 gravity. But all you have to do as a filmmaker is to double the speed and it's very clear that they're on Earth. They're not jumping 6 feet in the air, they're getting a few inches off of the ground.
It's silly. If you actually watch these things and speed up the film, it doesn't look natural. These guys are hopping around and they're out of balance.
Phil Plait is an astronomer at Sonoma State University in California. As far as he's concerned, Bart Zabrell is just plain crazy. If it was all faked on a movie set, why didn't the director just go for a second take when he saw the flag waving?
What's really going on is, in the airless environment of the moon, the astronauts have stuck a pole into the lunar surface and they're twisting it. And as they're twisting it, the flag is flapping. You don't need air to do that. It's very easy to show that you don't need air to do it. It's just the inertia of the cloth. It's just the flag flapping because material moves when you shake it.
And as for the shadows allegedly made by the studio lights,
well, that's wrong, and it's easy to show wrong. You can go out on an evening where the sun is low and shadows are long, and just look at a row of trees or a fence post, and if you look at them, you'll see that the shadows don't look parallel. It's just perspective, and that's all you're seeing in these images where the shadows look like they're going in different directions. It's simply due to perspective.
Zabrell claims that if the astronauts did travel to the moon, they would have passed through the Van Allen belt of radiation that surrounds the Earth. The early belief of scientists was that the Van Allen belt would be deadly to human travellers, but later research showed it might not be so harmful.
The experts believe that it's not lethal simply because they believe the astronauts went through it. I've interviewed them. They're my age, and they say, well, we know that the belts aren't lethal because the astronauts went through them to the moon and back. Therefore, they can't be hazardous to your health. And that's their logic as to why the belts are not lethal.
So what does NASA say about all this? At their headquarters in Houston, there's a museum for the mighty Saturn rockets that took the Apollo missions to the moon. Well, that's if you believe they did go to the moon. James Oberg is an unofficial spokesman for NASA. Unofficial because, apart from a brief press release, NASA has never made a detailed reply to the conspiracy theorists.
I think NASA feels that it's almost beneath their dignity. It gives more credibility to the stories to respond to them. It left the people out there who wondered about these things saying, aha, they can't answer these questions. It actually made the conspiracy theories stronger.
According to Bart Zabrell, NASA faked the moon landing not once, but 6 times. And apparently, despite the thousands of NASA staff involved in the Apollo missions, not one of them has ever confessed to the fraud of the century. How many people do you think know about this hoax?
The president knew, the Joint Chiefs of Staff knew, the president's closest staff knew, and then of course the people who photographed the false scenes knew. But we're talking potentially fewer than 100 people knowing that the moon landings were fraudulent. That's amazing.
Well, it is amazing because you're saying every astronaut is a liar.
Well,
every single one of them.
Yeah, they lied.
Bart Zabrell's theories may be far-fetched, even crazy, but at least they don't involve little green men in flying saucers. It seems, though, when it comes to anything to do with outer space, many Americans believe their government is guilty of a conspiracy of sorts. This is Roswell Air Force Base in New Mexico, which became famous for the so-called Roswell incident. It was 1947, and at first, an official Army release announced a crash landing by a flying saucer. But then pressure was put on witnesses, and a new official announcement proclaimed it was nothing more than a weather balloon. A cover-up for sure, said the conspiracy theorists. Today, Roswell's most popular attraction is the UFO Museum. where clearly no one is letting the facts get in the way of a good story. Do you believe Roswell saw an alien craft?
Did something land at Roswell in 47? I don't discount it.
Richard Hoagland is another conspiracy theorist. But unlike Bart Sibrel, he can claim some scientific credentials. Of course the Apollo astronauts went to the moon, he says. But the big conspiracy is what they found there.
It's an extraordinary universe we live in. I have real data on real NASA pictures with real pedigrees that say that there are ruins out there that we have not been told about.
Let's face it, you could argue that's Donald Duck and these grainy, out-of-focus NASA photos. But Richard Hoagland sees the ruins of an ancient civilization. He says all the world's religions would be proved false if the truth of these pictures was revealed. And that's why the astronauts have been silenced.
I think they saw the ruins of an extraordinary ancient civilization and technology.
But what did they look like?
Built primarily of glass, an extraordinarily battered and ancient decayed set of ruins.
You believe that what we see in those pictures is glass? A glass structure?
It's ruined glass. It's been battered by meteoritic bombardment for millions of years. NASA, we can prove, has lied about what's on these pictures. If they've lied about this, what else have they been concealing in the way of specifics?
I have no doubt that many people have called you stark, raving mad.
Okay. So?
Would that be right?
No.
Nobody's ever said to you...
Oh, no, of course they have.
You are absolutely bonkers.
But so what?
If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
As for Bart Sibrel, he's now at work on a new documentary. This time, his technique is to ambush astronauts wherever he can find them, produce a Bible, and ask them to swear that they really did go to the moon.
Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
Here's what happened when he met Buzz Aldrin, the national hero who most rational people believe was the second man to walk on the moon.
Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief. Did you get that on camera?
Now, of course, Mr. Sibrel, who could have said, oh, your punching me is clearly an indication of your suppressed guilt, which would have made his point maybe, but instead he turns to the camera and says, did you get that? I think that's a pretty good indication of where he's coming from.
Go to Bart Sibrel's website and you'll find out how to buy a copy of his documentary. And there's no shortage of customers. Which makes you wonder, is he just in it for the money, or is he just plain nuts?
Sure, it's an uphill battle. They faked going to the moon. They did it all in his studio. I mean, of course it sounds nutty. That's one of the things working in their favor.
Has it affected you personally? Has it been difficult to convince people you're not a nutter?
Hey, my philosophy is we're all insane and that some of us get caught and some of us don't.
And you haven't been caught yet, perhaps?
Not yet.
In the history of 60 Minutes, I'm not sure we've ever reported a story that for the most part is pure fantasy. But that's how to best sum up QAnon, an ever-shifting mega conspiracy theory that's bizarre and nonsensical. As wacky as it is, though, millions of people appear to be caught up in the internet-based cult, including more and more Australians. And that means there are dangerous, real-world consequences that demand the rest of us stop scratching our heads in disbelief and start to take serious notice of QAnon.
Do you want to free yourself? It's easy. Follow Q.
If QAnon was a movie script, it would be too far-fetched.
The world is currently witnessing the largest mass treason event in the living history.
The world ruled by a cabal of Satan-worshipping elites who prey on children and harvest their blood. With Donald Trump, our only saviour, ready to defeat the forces of darkness.
Who risk their lives to achieve this victory against the greatest force of evil the world has ever known.
And that's just the start.
That's just the headline-based theory. It goes so much deeper than that.
Discover the names and faces of the cabal agents who have colluded to destroy our republic and bend us to their will.
How deep does it go?
The German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, is Hitler's natural daughter. There's theories about Donald Trump being a time traveler, aliens, any conspiracy theory you've ever heard, including many you haven't, find a home in QAnon.
But I mean, you couldn't have believed that stuff, surely.
I went all the way up to aliens.
Jatath Jadeja is an ordinary guy who fell headlong into this extraordinary world. An economics student who, for 2.5 years, lived and breathed the ultimate conspiracy theory in all its madness. Jatath, how does a guy from suburban Sydney end up down the QAnon rabbit hole?
I was very disconnected from reality, I think, and I just was looking for answers, and that's how I found QAnon. It was all day, every day. It was like QAnon was my job, basically. You just become like that crazy homeless guy on the street shouting about Judgment Day, and you just make an ass out of yourself at all these parties, right? No one wants to talk to you. People are like, oh, it's weird. What are you doing, right?
It all began in December 2017, when Jatath was struggling to finish his degree. He became socially isolated and was drawn to the conspiracies swirling online. Stumbling onto QAnon, he fell for it, hook, line and sinker.
People have heard the same thing about QAnon, like this cabal of elite pedophiles and satanic blah, blah, blah. It's a very dark world.
You thought that politicians were pedophiles?
Yeah, especially, post Jeffrey Epstein, Jimmy Savile as well. I definitely thought that there was a cabal of elite pedophiles. This is almost like an existential battle between good and evil, like angels and demons.
It's just fantasy, right? This is not real.
It's not, but then of course not. Like what you do...
But how could you believe it? How could you believe something so fantastical?
What you do is that you want something to be true. I wanted someone to save us.
To comprehend how someone could believe the unbelievable, you first have to understand how QAnon works and just how seductive this parallel world can be.
QAnon is a cult-like conspiracy theory that holds that a military intelligence insider is using a variety of message boards to leak clues to an upcoming purge of the deep state.
You've lost me already. It's sort of hard to keep up.
It is. Anytime you spend any kind of time talking about this in any kind of depth, people just immediately glaze over. And that's one of the reasons why it's been so hard to get people to take it seriously, because it is so bizarre.
Mike Rothschild is a leading writer and researcher on conspiracy theories who spent the past year trying to make sense of it all.
QAnon can get as crazy as you want it to be. If you want to believe that Joe Biden is a clone, if you want to believe that John F. Kennedy Jr. has been hiding in a bunker for 20 years, if you want to believe that the Earth is part of a galactic federation of light, that's all there for you.
That's why we have Q. The good guys with control over the NSA began the Q intelligence dissemination program to invoke an online grassroots movement that came to be called the Great Awakening.
The original prophecy of QAnon is that Donald Trump is going to unleash a purge, a mass arrest of the pedophile cabal that runs the world. Well, Donald Trump can't do that anymore, but they're not going to give up on believing QAnon. They've come too far. They've sacrificed too much. This is too much a part of who they are to walk away from it.
Save our children!
Precise numbers are impossible to gauge, but millions of people are thought to be caught up in QAnon's wacky beliefs.
There are people in QAnon who are really just concerned about children. There are people in QAnon who really just hate Hillary Clinton. And there are people who do want to overthrow the government. So it appeals to almost everybody, and it really is almost anybody that can be sucked into it.
We'll be looking into that over the next short period.
Incredibly, it all stems from a single offhand comment made by Donald Trump in October 2017.
You guys know what this represents?
He was having dinner with a bunch of uniformed military higher-ups, and he said,
maybe it's the calm before the storm.
This could be the calm before the storm.
What's the storm? Could be the calm before the storm.
And the press was like, what are you talking about?
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
Now, in reality, he wasn't saying anything. That's what Donald Trump did as president. He just said stuff. But people wanted there to be a storm. People wanted there to be the punishment of enemies. And it caught on very quickly because of that.
On forums in the darkest recesses of the internet, vague and cryptic messages began to be posted, supposedly by a mysterious figure known as Q. Crumbs of information that were shared and deciphered by an online army eager to interpret their meaning.
It was like a Tom Clancey novel happening right outside your door, and then people wanted to be part of that.
Spawning ever more outlandish explanations about what was really going on.
The followers think of themselves as geniuses, as sort of playing this 5D high-level chess that Donald Trump also plays. But the reason why QAnon is so convoluted is actually the same reason why a lot of conspiracy theories are really convoluted. The more details you add to something, the more real it sounds.
So is the idea that the rest of us are ignorant if we don't understand it?
Yes, the rest of us are asleep, but the Q people want to wake us up. They don't want to hurt us, they want to teach us. They want us to join them. And that's one of the things that's so appealing about QAnon is this idea of secret knowledge. This idea that I know something that you don't know powers so much of conspiratorial thought.
The only thing Q wants you to do is think for yourself and expand your thinking and find out for yourself. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
Turbocharged by fears about COVID, QAnon has found fertile ground here in Australia.
This is between good and evil, and
pulling believers from every walk of life. Michelle Gilman is a hard-working single mum who's raised 2 kids. Back in QAnon's early days, at the age of 51, she headed down the rabbit hole into a warren of unconventional thinking where nothing is quite as it seems.
Once I discovered an alternative narrative, it really started to change the way I think. I mean, there's 4,953 Q posts.
And you work through every one of them?
I've read every one of them, yeah. Or I've listened to someone interpret every one of them.
So for you, Q is a person?
Q's more than one person, and I believe it's a team of people with very high level intelligence clearance, and that comes through with some of the posts that Q has put out.
It's time to research for yourself. You will find many things, among them an unprecedented number.
With the dedication of a scholar, Michelle has studied this alternate reality, forming her own worldview, very different to that of mainstream society.
It probably makes me sound like a conspiracy theorist, and I'm quite happy to wear that tag if people want me to be that. But
are you a conspiracy theorist?
No, I just believe in questioning. I was always a bit suspicious about the 9/11 thing.
So you don't believe 9/11 happened?
Oh, I don't know whether it did or not. It hasn't been proven either way. I don't know who the people were that flew planes in. The murder of JFK, the murder of JFK Jr.
You think there was a deep state conspiracy behind that?
I think there's a deep state group of people that are behind that, yeah. This could get me into big trouble, you know.
What?
Keeping out this, being on television talking about this sort of stuff.
Why?
Well, because there are a lot of people that don't want that information to come out.
It may have begun as an online conspiracy, but the shockwaves of QAnon have already spread far beyond the virtual world. Not only did its supporters lead the storming of the US Capitol building, kidnaps, assassination plots, and murder have all been linked to QAnon fanatics, including this bombing in Nashville on Christmas Day, carried out by a man convinced the world is controlled by a race of reptiles disguised as humans.
You know, while we may say it's foreign to Australia, it's not. It's here, and there are people here who believe this stuff.
Nick Caldis is a former top cop who is concerned about what could happen here in Australia.
Loving patriots, just trying to break free from the prison of the mind that was created for them.
Not only do authorities now have to recognise what a threat it is, but they've got to act. You can't ignore it anymore. I think we have seen, obviously, right-wing extremism and really nutty conspiracy theorists before, but the magnitude and the reach and their ability to influence people is probably unprecedented. So it's no longer just a very fringe group that you can discount and say, well, they're just a bunch of nuts. They are having an impact, and I don't for a minute doubt that there are a number in Australia who may ultimately move from rhetoric to some sort of action.
As a counter-terrorism expert, Nick sees strong parallels with Islamic terror and believes we need to monitor QAnon with a similar vigilance. Should police be treating QAnon in the same way they would treat a terrorist organisation?
I would argue yes, simply because they're capable of inspiring, commissioning, and encouraging others to do things in support of them or their beliefs.
Yeah, it's alarming when you think that a fringe conspiracy theory can get to the point where it becomes a global threat.
Absolutely. And you see it in terrorism, where a lot of people who inspire others to do this stuff are not prepared to put themselves in danger, but they're happy to send kids in suicide vests to go and do it on their behalf. I wouldn't put that sort of selfishness apart from QAnon. I think they're very capable of it.
Trump supporters are not violent people. Q supporters are not violent people.
Did what happened at the Capitol not seem violent to you?
Yeah, it was pretty outrageous, but there's a lot that's not being told. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's not being told.
Michelle Gilman sees QAnon as a force for good, not evil. She believes we all need to wake up to what's going on around us and the threat posed by what she calls the deep state.
These criminals are also known as the deep state, or cabal, because of how they control things behind the scenes.
Well, the deep state's the elites of the world. The deep state's the people that have all the money. Look what they've got planned for the world. One world government, no borders, no sovereignty. They're trying to take away people's free speech. They're trying to take away people's right to protest. So,
when you say that people's speech is being suppressed, that you feel as though you're being silenced?
I don't think anyone's intentionally silencing me, but we hesitate to speak out because people think you're crazy, you know, and...
Do you think you're crazy?
No, I don't think I'm crazy. I just think I know what I know, and I'm pretty confident in the information that I've been given. So, thank you. Do I sound crazy?
I don't think I really knew what QAnon was for a long while. And then, yeah, I sort of had to start looking into it a little bit more and was like, oh, okay, there's actually a lot to unpack here. There's a lot going on.
Michelle's daughter Charlotte has had to do plenty of research herself to understand her mum's newfound views of a world where Donald Trump's political rivals harvest the blood of children.
I was like, oh, so you don't actually believe this, right? And she was like, no, it actually happens if you do the research and you look into it. And I was like, okay, yeah, it's sort of something much bigger than I'd anticipated, really. It's not every day that you find out that your mum thinks that there's youth serum being distributed to the higher powers in secret.
You look like besties there.
Yeah, that's my mum, my best friend.
As her only daughter, Charlotte has always been very close to her mum.
I think we're definitely closer than most mother and daughter, for sure.
But QAnon has taken a serious toll on their relationship.
She's almost like created a different realm. It's a different reality, really, to the point where I just got frustrated because it's like, I can't really have a conversation with you because we can't just agree on the basic principles of what's happening.
We would argue. So we'd have discussions and sometimes they'd get a bit heated. Sometimes they get a lot heated, and she'd shut it down, we'd shut it down.
I think it was about 2 or 3 months before the election, I was like, we're finished. Like, I need to not speak to you until this is done. And even prior to that, every conversation we'd have would end in screaming or crying or this or that. You just don't know anything anymore. It's like, if my mum can fall for this crap, then what hope is there for the rest of us?
Jatath Jadeja knows firsthand the impact QAnon can have on relationships with others, and how the isolation it brings can become a vicious cycle.
QAnon only adds to that because it separates them from society, from their family and their friends. There's parents who have threatened their children, kicked them out of their house. There's decades-long marriages that have broken up, you know.
So families are losing loved ones to this theory, this crazy conspiracy.
They've already lost. Hundreds of thousands have already lost. Like, it's an epidemic.
Are you grateful you came out of it?
I'm very grateful. I'm not sure how it happened. I feel like I dodged a bullet.
Stepped out of the darkness into the light.
Jatath spent 2.5 years caught in the grip of QAnon before he finally got out. Quite unexpectedly, it was all thanks to Donald Trump.
There was a straw that broke the camel's back at a time when I was probably about teetering on the edge. Essentially, someone asked QAnon to get Trump to repeat a phrase in order to prove some kind of connection between Q and Trump. And the phrase was tip-top, tippy-top shape. 4 months later, Donald Trump used that phrase in front of the White House.
It is special, and we keep it in tip-top shape. We call it sometimes tippy-top shape.
I was like, wow, that's a very unique phrase. I've never heard that phrase before, right? That has to prove some kind of connection. It was only until much, much later when I looked into it a little deeper, that is just something that Donald Trump says. He says that from time to time. It's like a personal catchphrase of his.
My club's at tippy-top. It's got to be in tip-top shape. Everything was tippy-top.
It was the obvious manipulation in this that A, someone had to pick up on the fact that Donald Trump says this phrase.
I like tippy-top.
To find a way to use that in order to slide it into this sort of conspiracy as proof, it was almost genius, really. It was genius. And I looked at that and I thought, I've been manipulated here. It's so obvious I've been manipulated. So that was my moment. And I sort of, I just felt the world sort of crash in on me, and I threw out every single conspiracy theory I'd ever heard.
These days, Michelle and Charlotte have made their peace.
And I missed you. I missed you too.
Although they tried to avoid too much political discussion, agreeing to disagree about their very different views of the world.
So you've been able to find this peace, but ultimately you still believe in Q? You still disagree with your mum's beliefs?
Heavy opposite, yeah. Yeah, completely on the opposite spectrum, really. Yeah, I still think she's being hoodwinked, and I'm excited to be proven wrong.
Is there a part of you that wonders whether you've been hoodwinked here?
Oh, a little bit, yeah. And I've had that conversation with Charlotte. It's like, if I'm wrong, I'll, declare that I'm wrong, I'll concede, and...
But you don't think you are?
I know I'm not. I really, really know I'm not.
Jatath Jadeja has seen QAnon from both sides and views the world as a much nicer place without conspiracies in his life. But with Trump's chances of fulfilling the prophecy of Q slipping away, what followers call the storm, he worries about what might happen next.
Should Australians be alarmed?
Yeah. Well, 100%. Why wouldn't you be alarmed? QAnon has only been around since October 2017. That's not even 4 years, and it's now got millions of people around the world. They're harmed because they still think this plan is going to happen and Donald Trump is in control. If they become the storm, if they start thinking they need to bring about this doomsday, imagine what they could do.
They were the original superbugs: mumps, measles, polio and rubella. Thanks to modern immunisation, we don't see these diseases much anymore. So most of us have no first-hand knowledge of how dangerous they can be. Maybe that's why so many parents are questioning whether vaccination is the right choice for their children. And once they tap into the bottomless pit of misinformation swirling around the internet, fears are fuelled, minds are made up, and they may just say no to the needle. Well, tonight you'll meet some of the self-appointed experts behind the anti-vaccine campaigns and some grieving parents who couldn't disagree with them more. Perfect, big, handsome man. I think his mummy was a bit mad for him.
I think so.
This was baby Kayla Smith, just 5 weeks old. He'd just started to smile and his parents were besotted.
Love these birds.
They still can't comprehend, looking at this video, that he was dying before their eyes of whooping cough.
Goodness means it's good for your family. And when I say it serves for...
So this is the most important bit. That's what parents should be looking for, parents of newborns. Is that what you're saying? Just that little cough?
Yeah, you wouldn't think anything of it.
Jay and Roslyn want people to know what happened to their son Kalis. He was too young to be fully immunised, leaving him vulnerable to the sort of disease which plagued our grandparents and is still among us.
He was given a death sentence.
Yeah.
Someone so young was given a death sentence.
But try telling that to the anti-vaccine lobbyists, and this is what happens.
I am walking out of this because this is a farce. But how about you put me in touch with those parents? I will ask them relevant questions to establish the whole medical history of these children, and then we shall see what they really died of.
At 76, Dr. Vera Scheibner is the voice of authority in the anti-vaccine movement in Australia and around the world.
It's ridiculous.
And so how many documents are in this room?
Well, it is more than 100,000 pages of medical papers.
For 26 years now, she's been writing prolifically about the dangers of vaccines.
It's a national treasure. Based on my extensive research of orthodox medical literature, I am totally against any vaccination.
Have you got anything good to say about vaccines?
No, because the immunity is achieved by going through the natural infectious diseases of childhood, such as measles, whooping cough, mumps, rubella.
So vaccines are dangerous and diseases are good?
Exactly.
Kalis was born in February this year, a little brother for 2-year-old Shayla. He only died 7 weeks ago, and his parents are still reeling from how quickly whooping cough claimed his life and how little doctors could do about it. On Tuesday, he's sent home with a cold, and on Friday, he's on life support.
Yeah, shock. Every mother's worst nightmare, I think.
And they had 15, 20 doctors around him, just screaming resus, and it was all on.
I think people are thinking this is a normal cold, like a bad cold. But it's not, it's a disease, you know. Look up the word disease in the dictionary, I think.
It's not so much the dictionary you need to consult, but the history books.
The recent paralysis epidemic in South Australia brought most of the affected children to the wards of the Adelaide Children's Hospital.
Vaccines have virtually wiped out polio, measles and mumps in Australia. They're so rare, today's doctors would struggle to diagnose them. So if a little kid turns up with measles in the waiting room out there, it's a surprise.
That's right. And it's something that a lot of people just haven't seen.
And yet, half a century on, Professor Peter McIntyre from the Children's Hospital at Westmead still has to argue the benefits of parents giving their kids the jab.
We're not immunising to protect children against trivial diseases. We're immunising them to protect them against diseases which can have very serious impacts. And if we stop immunising, they can very quickly come back.
What are the risks if a parent chooses not to vaccinate a child?
As a parent, deciding not to immunise your child from the child's point of view is you playing Russian roulette with their life.
So tell me about these boys. Who's who? Connor's 12. Sydney mum Meredith Collins has heard all those dire warnings about the importance of vaccinations, but she's not convinced. Her eldest son had an adverse reaction to his first needles, and she hasn't been back with the other two. Wouldn't you rather err on the side of safety, though?
I'm not willing to put my children or their health at risk with immunisations that I don't have any real evidence to say that they definitely work, when there are also inherent risks in immunisation.
While Meredith's not a member of any anti-vaccine networks, it's striking that their ideas have penetrated all the way through to her in suburban Australia.
I was concerned about the base of mercury and formaldehyde in immunisations.
You're worried about mercury in these injections, but mainstream medical research says there is no risk from that mercury. There's more mercury in a tuna sandwich.
Depending on who you're talking to. I mean, if it's a pharmaceutical company that's actually issuing the research, well then maybe, just maybe, they're releasing particular information to market that suits their purposes. I don't know.
So when you look at the mainstream medical research that says things like this, you're worried there is a conspiracy?
I'm not worried at all. I'm asking you the question, who funded that research? That's all I'm asking.
Initially, they just took kidneys of wild monkeys and minced them.
Working alongside Dr. Vera Scheibner is her friend Bronwyn Hancock. With a background in IT, Bronwyn's even set up a website to promote Dr. Scheibner's ideas, alongside her own lengthy exposés on the dangers of modern medicine. You write here that the body only catches a disease if it needs to. So all those polio and measles epidemics, Bronwyn, the kids, their bodies wanted to catch those diseases, did they?
There are benefits of diseases. Now, I say that with qualification because obviously diseases have to be well managed, and going through a disease is like us getting exercise. This is one of the reasons why it's good to get rubella as soon as possible so that you have immunity to it.
But what about the risk of rubella to pregnant women who can have babies suffering terrible birth defects?
Don't answer things that you don't know enough about, okay? Just don't answer them. You were drowning, so let's call spade a spade. You see? Yeah. She was drowning, yeah.
Why would she be drowning?
Because she hasn't got the extent of knowledge that I have.
If she hasn't got the extensive knowledge, why on earth is she writing these articles on the website?
Maybe you have a point there. Yes, that's right. Maybe you have a point there, okay?
So just for clarity, you're not a medical doctor?
I'm not a medical doctor, no. But I am a doctor of natural sciences.
Am I right in thinking that in fact your expertise is in studying microfossils, little fossils?
My expertise is in many areas. One of them was microscopic fossils.
But actually, just for the record, you have no formal medical training.
I wouldn't say that, because I did a course of nursing when I was young.
But do you believe you know more than most doctors?
Yes, I believe I know more than most doctors.
Vera's adamant that her qualifications were earned in this very room. During the quarter of a century, she's spent diligently analysing medical journals. For instance, in 1998, an explosive report from the British doctor Andrew Wakefield claimed there was a link between autism and the measles, mumps and rubella vaccine. And Vera, like many others, remains convinced.
Vaccination of any kind causes autism.
So only children who are vaccinated get autism?
That's right, yes.
That's a heck of a story.
It is a heck of a story, yes.
And that's just what it was, a story. Fiction, not fact. Last year, Dr. Wakefield was struck off the medical register for falsifying his research. Not that Vera has got the message.
It was fraud. And yet, despite that flimsy evidence, once something gets out and there are people looking for answers, particularly with something nasty like autism, it'll just keep going.
Should the medical community be more candid about the risks of vaccines, both now and in the past, in order to overcome some of the community anxiety about giving kids the jab?
Absolutely. And believe me, if we were concerned about something not working, or particularly something that was actually causing harm, we'd be the first to put up our hands and say, well, let's stop it.
Such concerns about vaccines can unsettle a whole community. Here in parts of northern New South Wales, as many as 1 in 3 children is not immunised. And as the immunisation rates went down, the rates of disease here went up, particularly dangerous for any baby under 6 months old, as they are too young to be fully vaccinated.
This is Dana.
And so it was here in 2009 that little Dana McCaffrey was born into the middle of a whooping cough epidemic.
Like her mum, grandmother and a cousin.
By the time the doctors worked out she was infected, it was too late.
And I have to live every day knowing that because I took Dana out as a newborn, someone breathed on her and she's dead.
Now David and Tony McCaffrey are taking no chances with their 4th child, Sarah. She won't leave the house until she's fully immunised. David's even off work as a teacher because 1 in 5 children at his school has tested positive for whooping cough. Are you comfortable with me being this close to Sarah without a mask?
I am, because you've had the booster.
The whooping cough.
The whooping cough booster. Whereas Richard hasn't had the booster yet.
Our cameraman.
Yeah.
We lost a child to whooping cough, and we don't want to lose her.
Everyone's focusing on the deaths. What about the children that survive? It is a horrible disease. What it does, it breaks ribs, brain damage, scars their lungs. Their lungs can collapse, perforated lungs. Pneumonia every year. They have a cold for the rest of their life. Chronic asthma. This is what whooping cough does.
And how do you know they died from whooping cough?
These children went to hospital and the doctors there diagnosed them with whooping cough. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
But if the child was given hepatitis B at birth, it certainly suppressed its immune system and made it very susceptible to catching whooping cough from people around.
They're dead because their parents immunised them at birth against hepatitis B.
That's right, absolutely. Because vaccines are the single biggest cause of infant death. Those mothers have no knowledge to judge the case. They only listen to what doctors tell them. And of course, the doctors are only too happy to start blaming the disease instead of their vaccines.
Can I put it to you both that maybe not from malicious intent, that the two of you are involved in a conspiracy to cover up the plain fact that infants die an agonising death from whooping cough?
Absolutely not. And I am walking out of this because this is a farce. But how about you put me in touch with those parents? I will ask them relevant questions to establish the whole medical history of these children, and then we shall see what they really died of. And I don't accept any accusations from you or anybody else about me doing something wrong, because I'm not doing anything wrong.
People have said to you, we want proof that this is how your daughter died.
I watched my daughter over 5 days die the most agonising death, and I don't want any other parent to go through that.
And what do you say to them about proof?
My proof's in a cemetery.
For the Smiths, their grief is still raw. They have learned the hardest way what our grandparents and great-grandparents knew, that childhood diseases can kill, and there's still no cure, only prevention.
To see a child laying there from being perfectly healthy, just a little bit of a cold, to on full life support, knowing that he probably won't live, you won't get to touch him, you won't get to hear his cry, don't just smell him. To hear your baby cry, you don't, it's a beautiful thing. I just wish I could hear him cry again.
Just who is hoodwinking who? There's no doubt COVID-19 has caused great uncertainty in the world, but does that mean we should ignore the scientists, doctors and even politicians who are working to figure out ways to beat the virus? Well, yes, if you believe an increasing number of increasingly angry people who are convinced coronavirus is nothing more than a sinister plot to control their lives. But what do these conspiracy theorists know that we don't? And why are so many people listening to them?
If there's two things that are important in life, it's truth and it's freedom.
Shocking and horrific Australian government fascist lockdown.
COVID-19 has created a perfect storm for conspiracy theorists.
It's all a mind game.
Around the world, we're seeing them become more vocal and more extreme.
What if all you ever knew was a lie?
Believing that much of what they're being told by the authorities, by the scientific and medical world, by the media, is a big fat lie.
We want information and we want the truth. The truth doesn't change.
Why have we seen this uprising, do you think? People who may never have decided to go public with their views are doing that. Why is that?
Because some things just don't make sense with this. Some things just don't add up.
The theories are as numerous as they are nonsensical.
There's your 5G policy.
From 5G towers and vaccines spreading coronavirus to suspicions the virus was unleashed deliberately by Bill Gates, or that a cabal of elites are intent on taking over the world. For most of us, they're ideas that are simply unbelievable.
Because there are ulterior motives.
Absolutely. But to those leading the charge, we're the crazy ones if we don't start paying attention.
It's the level of lies I believe we're being told. Just seeing the way that this thing has unfolded and the motives of the government and what they're telling everyone to do, it seems more about control than preventing the spread of a virus.
Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Come on.
37-year-old Thanos Panayiotis is an ordinary bloke from the burbs of Melbourne.
Do you feel like a rebel?
A newcomer to the world of total distrust.
We are here to ask questions and have them answered because things don't make sense.
At a protest a month ago, he took centre stage before being arrested. A dramatic introduction to his new role as a leader of the anti-lockdown movement.
I'm just some dude from Epping, to be honest.
So, what happened? How did you find yourself in this position?
When I felt that what's going on wasn't totally above board, where I believed the world is moving towards, I became concerned.
For what?
Look, I've always known and believed there are certain controlling interests in the world that are looking towards a one-world government, one-world currency, and that's a good thing as long as the people at the top have the people's best interests in mind. Because if they don't have the common man's interests in mind, then that's a very dangerous thing.
Just 2 months ago, Thanos gave up his job training security guards to set up an online group that now has 60,000 members.
Hey guys, how you going?
And he speaks to them from his lounge room about his fears for the world.
We're the people, mate. If we don't want the vaccine, we're the people, not you. You don't make the decisions for us.
I was overwhelmed by the amount of people that were in sync with what I was saying.
You see this thing here? This thing here is called a television. Tell-a-vision.
Believing mainstream media is part of the Great Deception, Thanos encouraged his supporters to make a show-stopping statement.
No longer will we be programmed.
He showed them how.
Tell-a-vision.
Tells us what to do. It's like television.
And many followed.
What that was a protest against the overwhelming lies that the media has been pouring.
Well, it won't light, but you get the picture.
A protest against mainstream media.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah, I know.
Why?
I said to myself, look, at the end of the day, if the media want to paint you as something, they're going to paint you as it anyway. So you might as well at least have a voice and just come on and just be you.
We all know that a war is going on right now, and it's not just a COVID biological war. It's a war about ownership over your body and your mind.
Whenever there's an event, a global event or even a local event, that makes people feel that they have lost control over their lives or their future, that is when conspiracy theories emerge. Pandemics have been giving rise to conspiracy theories for centuries.
Professor Stefan Lewandowski is a cognitive scientist. He studies the way people think and why they engage in conspiracy theories.
For some people, not everybody, but for some people, conspiracy theories become very attractive because they're offering psychological comfort, ironically. If you can assume that there is a handful of really bad people out there who are conspiring to do these terrible things, that provides you with comfort because in principle, at least, it would be controllable.
So it can't have happened unless somebody or something bad was behind it.
Basically, some people find it much easier to explain big traumatic events by postulating a big, really evil cause for that.
This to me is the life. Is this how you would like it to be?
Barefoot, hearing the ocean, having a surf. I mean, this is what it's about. And it doesn't mean we can't be serious at times. I've been known to be serious occasionally.
And complicated.
Usually with a suit on.
For a long time now, celebrity chef Pete Evans has straddled two very different worlds.
G'day everyone, afternoon update. We have some new podcasts for you.
To the more than 1.5 million people who follow him on social media, he's Paleo Pete.
You just replace the buns with mushrooms.
Promoting a diet of low carbs.
What's the breathwork called?
Served with a side dish of what he calls expanded consciousness, with a dollop of conspiracy. Are you a skeptic?
It's a good question, am I a skeptic? Because I have a very healthy skepticism about everything.
Or are you deeply suspicious?
Ooh, that's a good one too. I am skeptical, and I also am suspicious, because history has shown us that, even science, and you know this as a fact, science has been bought by vested interests in so many different fields over the years.
Pete has attracted plenty of suspicion himself, with controversial views on everything from sunscreens to dietary advice.
To immerse yourself in a healing modality or healing tool.
Most recently, he copped a large fine for spruiking a $15,000 biocharger lamp.
It's programmed with about 1,000 different recipes. There's a couple on there for Wuhan coronavirus,
which he claimed could help those with COVID-19.
It's on my website if anyone's interested.
His social media pages have also given exposure to some of the more bizarre theories surrounding the virus.
You posted, for example, a shot of Bill Gates.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he is part of a conspiracy?
I don't know. And I don't know.
You put that up on your Facebook, for example, and why do you do that if you don't buy into it a bit?
Because what Bill is suggesting, and every single interview that he has done recently, is suggesting that the world will not become safe until every single person on the planet has been vaccinated for this.
But what makes you think he can force that, even if you thought that?
Because he seems to be having a lot of influence with certain areas.
Just like you, Pete.
I don't have the ability to put something into your body. So the comparison between
I'm not sure Bill Gates can put it into your body either, just quietly.
I don't know. Is the World Health Organization the one that does that? Is it the governments? Is it... could be a great story for you to look at.
Pete Evans is in a place where he feels most at home. in the surf, on the beach, under the sun, enjoying a newfound freedom and feeling ever more empowered to explore the world away from what he calls the mainstream narrative.
My intention is to inhabit a place of everything, so nothing is closed off, you know, and to be in that space means you're allowed to ask questions from all sides.
Well, maybe I should ask you this. You believe the virus exists?
I believe it does. From all accounts, it seems to be that exists, yes.
I ask you that because that's one of the many things that are said in this alternative space, that the virus simply doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So you accept that the COVID-19 virus exists?
To the best of my knowledge at this particular point in time, all the evidence proves or shows at this point in time that the COVID-19 virus exists.
It's a real thing?
Yeah.
And if there was a vaccine...
Correct.
Would you take it?
That's an interesting question. No.
Does that make you an anti-vaxxer?
No, not at all. I'm a big proponent of vaccines. There are very important vaccines out there in the community, to the best of my knowledge.
Just that this vaccine is a problem for you if it should come about.
Well, therein lies the detail to the question. If it comes about, and if it is proved to be 100% safe for every single man, woman and child on the face of the planet. Now, if somebody can say and prove that it is completely safe, then I might consider it.
For protest leader Fenis Panayiotis, the seeds of doubt about coronavirus and the true world order were sown when he was 12 years old, when he made the curious promise to his father that he'd never allow himself to be microchipped.
I remember I came into the house and my dad sat me down and he said, there's going to be a day in the future that you're going to get told to put a microchip in you. He goes, just listen to my words. When that day comes, don't you dare put that thing in your body.
Do you know where your father got that idea from?
I'm quite sure that it was from something called the Prophecy of St. John that he'd read.
As far-fetched as it might sound, Fenis is convinced that day may soon be upon us all. When countries went into lockdown as the virus was sweeping the world, infecting more than 6 million people, Fenis decided the numbers just didn't add up.
In my opinion, do I believe the virus is real? No, I don't.
There's no COVID-19
I believe there's probably a flu going around getting people sick, but I believe the motives of the world at the moment doesn't make sense at all.
What would it take to change your mind about the contagious nature of this virus?
See it be contagious.
Did you see those pictures in Italy? Have you seen those pictures in New York? Does that not tell you, wow, this is a contagious virus?
Yeah, but there's media manipulation.
And you know what we are? We're just pawns in a big game.
I think particularly with the lockdown, a lot of people have lost their usual routine, their usual structures, their usual support systems. And then when people are more isolated, they've got a bit more time to think, they've got a bit more time to worry. That also builds anxiety and leaves people more vulnerable to these dangerous ideas being flouted out there.
Dr. Danielle McMullen is president of the New South Wales branch of the Australian Medical Association.
Hi, so you're here for your flu vaccine today?
Containing the outbreak of conspiracy theories has become another part of her job, particularly during COVID-19 times.
Is it frustrating?
It's getting repetitive. So it is frustrating that people think that we're all out to get you and it's all one big lie, because the health system, nor the healthcare workers working within it, nor the governments in charge of it have anything to gain from this pandemic.
So you obviously don't think Bill Gates is behind all this?
I do not think Bill Gates is behind coronavirus, and I also don't think he would have anything to gain through creating coronavirus, nor can we put microchips into people through vaccinations. Let's get that clear.
There's no doubt the spread of coronavirus has seen an amplification of fears on so many fronts, and with it, a sense of powerlessness and loss of control that Pete Evans identifies with.
You've seen the stories of people that haven't been able to, connect. I shared that I visited my mum through this whole thing, and I love you, Mum, and she probably wouldn't like me saying it, but, she said, I don't know what to believe. And I asked her, I said, Mum, can I give you a hug? And can your granddaughters give you a hug? And that action alone, fuck, that is what being human is about. And if I have to live in a society where I can't hug my mum because I've been told it's unsafe, she was allowed to make the decision whether we hugged her or not. I said, this is your decision, Mum, but we're here for you. And she fucking needed it. She needed that. And I needed it, and my kids needed it.
It's that sense of vulnerability that scientist Professor Stefan Lewandowski sees as giving rise to conspiratorial thinking. Fringe ideas of a small percentage of people given power by social media.
Unlike real life, I can go onto social media and it doesn't matter how absurd a belief I hold, I will find a community of like-minded people. I can think the earth is flat. Guess what? I go on Facebook, and out of the billions of Facebook users, a few hundred others will believe what I believe. Now, in real life, you can't do that because there's so few of them that you'll never find them. But on social media, you can. Now, that is not a trivial result, because what that does is to reinforce people's belief and makes them more resistant to persuasion.
There's usually some unkind words said about conspiracy theorists. Should we be a bit more gentle about that?
I totally understand why some people would be drawn to a conspiracy theory because it offers comfort. Now, where my empathy stops is
Welcome back to 60 Minutes. Few historical moments of the last century are as powerful or as visceral as the assassination of American President John F. Kennedy. It may be difficult to imagine in these hardened political times, but JFK was much more than a mere politician. He was a star, a beacon of hope for the future. Of course, all that was shattered when he was gunned down in Dallas, Texas. As we approach the 50th anniversary of that shocking day, anyone old enough will no doubt recall that moment with vivid clarity, but none more so than the bodyguard who still can't forgive himself for failing to save the president's life. And a warning, in our story, you'll see the full, unedited vision of the moment JFK was killed. November the 22nd, 1963, and America's Nightmare on Elm Street is about to begin. The assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas.
We got to about this point on Elm Street, and the first shot rang out.
You were sitting where the president was sitting?
I'm sitting where the president was sitting.
I'm driving down the most painful of memory lanes with former Secret Service agent Clint Hill.
I saw the president move violently to his left, and I knew something was wrong. He grabbed at his throat.
A lone gunman fires 3 shots in 6 seconds and mortally wounds the most dashing president the United States has ever known. Clint Hill is the bodyguard climbing onto the back of the Kennedy limousine. 50 years on, he still hasn't forgiven himself for not saving the president's life.
There's that feeling in my gut that I should have gotten there in time. I should have been able to get up there, and I should have taken that 3rd shot myself.
You should have taken the bullet for the president.
That's what I think.
That was your job.
That's exactly it. That was my job. That's why I have that sense of guilt, failure, because I wasn't able to get there in time.
So help you God. So help me God.
It all began 3 years earlier with so much promise. A charismatic young president, a war hero with a glamorous wife and a young family, and a wonderful way with words.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
The Kennedy White House was an all too brief period of political enchantment that came to be forever known as Camelot.
It was a whole new adventure for we in the Secret Service, as well as for all the people in the United States.
That's right. It was a triumph of the 60s, really, wasn't it? The coming to power of young people.
It was, as the president said in his inaugural address, it's a new generation.
At the time, Clint Hill was an ambitious young Secret Service agent, desperate to stay on the presidential detail, only to be bitterly disappointed when told he would be looking after the president's wife.
I didn't want to be assigned to Mrs. Kennedy. I had been with President Eisenhower, and I had seen how First Ladies previously had operated.
Weren't terribly exciting.
No, they weren't, and I didn't want any part of that. I wanted to be where the action was, and that was always, in the past, had been with the President of the United States.
Clint Hill, along with the rest of the world, would quickly learn Jackie Kennedy was an entirely different kind of First Lady.
She was a wonderful, elegant, considerate lady.
Beautiful.
Classy, beautiful.
And you called her?
Mrs. Kennedy.
And she called you?
Mr. Hill. And that never varied.
Clint Hill was not only Jackie Kennedy's bodyguard, but her most trusted ally. She spent more time with him than with any other person, including the president.
We would spend the summers in Cape Cod and then perhaps go to Europe for a period of time. Spent Christmas and New Year's and Easter in Palm Beach, Florida.
You lived the high life, young man.
I lived the high life, but I was living it on $12 a day.
The president brought his wife home after the death.
In November 1963, Jackie was recovering from the death of her newborn son, Patrick.
Then there is Mrs. Kennedy.
She decided to travel to Texas with the president to help sway votes in what would be a tough upcoming presidential election. It was a huge event for the Lone Star State and a security nightmare for Clint Hill and the rest of the Secret Service. A pressing crowd, open windows in every building, and the president's instructions to the agents to stay well back from his open car.
Because he didn't want it to appear there was anything between himself and the people who were there to see him.
How did you feel about that?
Well, we all felt that we'd be better off with someone on the car. But we knew that that was his preference, and we thought we could manage the situation without being there.
Despite this presidential wish, Clint did ride on the Kennedy car for some of the way. Such was the crush of the crowd. But coming to the end of the route through Dallas, he relaxed and hopped back onto the following vehicle.
And then we just went one block, and then we turned left onto Elm Street. And that put us right in front of the Texas School Book Depository.
On the corner of Houston and Elm, a lone gunman named Lee Harvey Oswald was about to start shooting from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
I saw the president grab at his throat, and he moved to his left violently, and I knew something was wrong. And so I jumped from the follow-up car, ran toward the presidential vehicle with the idea of getting on top of the rear of the car to form a protective barrier behind President and Mrs. Kennedy to prevent any further damage from being done. As I got close to the car, a third shot was fired, and it hit the president in the head. It entered the rear of the president's head, and it exited the upper right quadrant of the skull. And blood and brain matter and bone fragments came out of the wound, came over the back of the car, over Mrs. Kennedy, and onto myself.
Not knowing how many shots would be fired, or how many shooters there were for that matter, Clint Hill desperately tries to get up on the president's car.
While I was doing that, Mrs. Kennedy came out in the trunk. She was trying to grab some of the material that came off the president's head.
She's hanging over the back of the car?
She's right up on the back of the car. And she didn't know I was there. And I finally got up there and I got a hold of her and put her in the back seat. And when I did that, the president's body fell off to its left into her lap. His head was on her lap, and the right side of his face was up. I could see his eyes were fixed, and I considered it a fatal wound. And I turned and I gave a thumbs down to the other agents in the car immediately behind, called the follow-up car.
Something has happened in the motorcade.
This appalling act of terrorism happened right in front of Bill and Gail Newman and their young sons.
We were looking at the car, and the first two shots rang out. It was a bang, bang like that.
What did you think at that moment?
I thought it was firecrackers. I'd never been around gunfire and, didn't know what it would sound like, but when the car got directly in front of us, that third shot rang out, and you could see just bits of flesh flying up in the air and sort of white matter coming out of his head. And I mean, it was so shocking.
The president was hit in the head.
After racing to Parkland Hospital and helping to carry the president inside, Clint Hill phoned Washington.
I was trying to explain to my boss in Washington what had happened, and the operator cut in and said, Mr. Hill, the Attorney General wants to talk to you. The Attorney General being Robert Kennedy, the president's brother.
That's a difficult moment. How do you tell his brother?
Well, that was the problem. He said, what's going on down there? Because he really didn't know. And so I explained what the situation was. And then he said, well, how bad is it? I did not want to tell him that his brother was dead. So I simply said, well, it's as bad as it can get.
That was the truth.
And with that, he hung up the phone. So then at 1 o'clock, Dallas time, doctors came out and said, the president has died. The president is dead.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official,
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
I was in the other side of the world. I was a kid in Tasmania, a school kid, and it was early in the morning. I remember vividly switching on a blue HMV valve radio receiver, and as the valves warmed up, slowly the voices came in and told me that the president had been shot. I ran down the corridor, I remember, to alert a largely disbelieving household. But as we gathered round television and radio, it soon became apparent that that in fact was the awful truth. That somehow the history of the world had been violently changed and our own lives, in a way, would never be quite the same again.
I think we lost our innocence. It was just a terrible thing to happen, and it affected everybody.
The funeral of JFK was held on the 25th of November, 1963. It was the third birthday of his young son, John, who touchingly saluted the father he would never know. It is the saddest, one of the saddest images of the century, isn't it?
And standing there that day, generals to privates all had a tear in their eye when they saw this young boy salute their father.
I think everybody did around the world.
To Dallas, Texas.
As for the gunman Lee Harvey Oswald, no one would learn why he shot the president.
There is Lee Oswald.
Oswald was infamously gunned down by local nightclub owner Jack Ruby in the Dallas police station.
Man with a gun, it's absolute panic.
But despite all the conspiracy theories, there has never been any credible evidence to suggest anything other than that Oswald acted alone. Certainly, that's what Clint Hill believes.
Okay, Charlie, this is it's called the sniper's perch. This is where Lee Harvey Oswald secluded himself or put himself in a position to observe what was going on in the motorcade.
It took Clint Hill a long time to come to terms with the events of that day. Despite being awarded for his bravery, he battled depression and alcoholism for years after retiring from the service. Only recently has he been writing and talking about the assassination, which he says has been hugely therapeutic for the lingering guilt.
I still have that sense that I should have been able to do just enough to get there in time, but you can't go faster than a speeding bullet.
And you can't turn back time.
No, you cannot.
It is said the death of President Kennedy spelled the end of America's age of innocence. Perhaps that's too simple and romantic a view, but it is a reflection of the mark one man and his beautiful wife left on the world, and left in particular on a long-retired but ever-loyal Secret Service agent.
I do have some wonderful memories.
They're not all obliterated by the bad ones.
No, there are more wonderful memories than there are bad memories.
That's
the only
right.
problem is the one real bad memory is a horrific one.
It's now been nearly 2.5 years since Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 disappeared off the face of the Earth. And having spent $180 million unsuccessfully trying to find it in the southern Indian Ocean, it's now likely the search will soon be called off. Understandably, the thought of that is incredibly distressing for the families of the 239 passengers and crew who are presumed dead. But air crash investigators must also now question their own assumptions about the disaster, and more particularly must start looking at other compelling scenarios for the plane's disappearance. And incredibly, while most people are baffled by MH370, one expert says he knows exactly what happened.
You know, I hear tell this is the greatest mystery in the history of aviation. No, it's not.
You think you know the answer?
I'm confident that I know the answer, yeah.
Larry Vance is one of the world's top air crash investigators. He says there's no mystery at all to the loss of MH370. that for nearly a year, the evidence has been there all along to prove what really happened. And Malaysia knows it.
Thank you, members of the media.
Oh, absolutely. Somebody was flying the airplane at the end of its flight. Somebody was flying the airplane into the water.
Tonight, extraordinary new evidence that raises doubts about the whole premise on which the Australian-led search for the passenger jet has been based.
We will find it.
For the first time,
We have it here. Yeah.
the leaked report detailing how shortly before the doomed flight, the Malaysian captain rehearsed a route deep into the Southern Ocean. And we reveal new physical evidence from wreckage the Malaysians have so far failed to retrieve.
You're avoiding the issue. Are you saying it wasn't a controlled ditching of the aircraft?
We'll continue to analyze the data.
Is Malaysia admitting all it knows?
If you look back over the last 2.5 years and the actions of the Malaysians, it just tells me that they're hiding something. Something is not right here. I've been patient. I've given them the benefit of the doubt. For me, the gloves are off now.
At 42 minutes past midnight on the 8th of March 2014, flight MH370 flew out of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia for Beijing, China. All seemed routine. The captain, 53-year-old Zahari Ahmed Shah, a 33-year veteran with Malaysian Airlines, 18,000 hours flying experience. Malaysian investigators have declared that the behaviour of both the captain and his 27-year-old first officer before the flight did not raise any suspicions. It's in the darkness over the South China Sea, 40 minutes after takeoff, where the mystery of MH370 begins. Most on board are probably fast asleep. And if you're going to steal a passenger jet and kill everyone on board, now is the perfect time to do it. Just past 1:21 in the morning, MH370's transponder signal disappears from radar screens. Within a couple of minutes, the jet then does a tight U-turn back towards Malaysia. You've based your whole analysis on the assumption that this was an uncontrolled flight that basically found its way to the Southern Ocean for reasons that defy explanation.
Correct.
Is it possible you're wrong?
In terms of the modelling, it's highly unlikely. We're dealing with probabilities here.
Peter Foley is the Australian Transportation Safety Board manager leading the search for MH370. He admits our search is premised on the assumption that the jet was not under human control when it crashed, that it was a ghost flight. Is there any explanation that you can offer that would explain how a modern jet like a 777 could suffer a catastrophic failure, execute a turn back to Malaysia, execute another turn up the northern extent of Malaysia, execute another turn around Penang and another turn around the northern tip of Sumatra? In order to execute a turn like that, somebody has to enter coordinates into the flight management computer, don't they?
That's correct. There is a possibility that there was someone in control at the end, and we're actively looking for evidence to support that.
This confidential analysis of Captain Zahari's home flight simulator reveals evidence the captain tried to hide by wiping his hard drive. A month before the doomed flight, Zahari plotted an almost identical route deep into the southern Indian Ocean. A simulation that clearly contemplated the jet running out of fuel over the open sea. A route that eerily mirrors the one believed to have been flown by MH370. You don't deny the existence of that report, do you?
Absolutely exists.
We have it here.
Yeah.
We found a flight path that leads to the southern Indian Ocean.
Correct.
The Malaysians knew early in the search that this disturbing evidence existed, but they've chosen to deny all and to exonerate their captain in their interim factual reports. But their flight simulator report that they deny even exists is a vital piece of evidence that casts doubt on the search premise that MH370 was unpiloted. I'll tell you, as a taxpayer who's seen an enormous amount of money spent on an investigation, not least the victims, I would want to know about this report showing that the captain tracked a flight path into the southern Indian Ocean. Don't you think the public has a right to know this?
I think, as we would strongly argue, it should form a part of a final report.
What about the interim factual analysis? Why wasn't it put into the interim factual analysis?
That's a question for the Malaysians. Ross?
In a ditching, there would only be a small number of pieces, maybe the two engines.
Australia's theory, based on satellite data, is that MH370 was unpiloted at the end. But one of the world's most experienced air crash investigators disagrees. He says that MH370 was brought down by a rogue pilot.
There is no other alternate theory that you can follow of all the potentials that might have happened. There's no other theory that fits. But if you had the engines out, how do you get the flaps down?
Larry Vance knows well what happens to an aircraft when it hits water at high speed. He led the Canadian investigation into the Swissair 111 jet crash into the Atlantic Ocean off Nova Scotia in 1998.
An airplane that goes out of control at 30,000 feet will hit the water with tremendous impact.
And this is what you saw in the Swissair
Oh, we saw it in Swissair. We see it in other accidents. It's exploded. In Swissair, we had 2 million pieces. This airplane would have had 2 million pieces.
But an extremely high-speed descent that you'd think should have left a massive debris field like this one is what the ATSB claims its satellite data shows.
The fact is we got a bit of hard data that says the aircraft was in a rapid rate of descent. We've got a rate of descent that's between 12 and 20,000 feet a minute.
Which begs the question, where then is all that debris that Larry Vance says should have resulted from that kind of high-speed impact?
In Swissair, we had thousands of pieces of floating debris. They came up, they stayed on the surface.
Days afterwards?
Days, oh yes, absolutely, days, weeks.
A year ago, this flaperon from MH370 was found on the shores of a French island off the coast of Madagascar. It's a small but vital section of the 777's wing. It aids and enables takeoff and landing. When the jet is flying, the flaperon sits retracted into the wing. But on landing, the flaperon extends out with the flaps. What position was the flaperon in, you believe, when this aircraft went into the ocean?
I think that this flaperon shows definite evidence that it was extended. You cannot get the flaperon to extend any other way than if somebody extends it. Somebody would have to select it.
So the only plausible scenario, you believe, is that at the end of that 7-hour lonely flight into the depths of the Indian Ocean, someone activated the flaperon.
Absolutely.
And the most likely reason for that, says Larry, is a controlled ditching, which explains why there was no floating debris from the massive aircraft. A slow landing, leaving the fuselage mostly intact.
I mean, if a flaperon can make its way to Madagascar, then a life jacket or a seat cushion can make its way to somewhere. We don't see any of that. There's nothing from inside the airplane.
Every expert on ocean currents says floating debris, especially life jackets and seat cushions, should have washed ashore by now. but they haven't.
I think that the reason that we don't see debris from inside the airplane washing up in different places around the ocean is because that debris remained in the fuselage, and the fuselage went to the bottom.
The family of MH370's captain, Zahari Ahmed Shah, has consistently rejected the idea that he could ever have been responsible for deliberately crashing the jet into the ocean. But our investigation reveals that the only possible scenario on the evidence is that a skilled pilot did deliberately land the 777 on the water. And the strongest clue is a piece of evidence Malaysia hasn't even examined. A small piece of wing called the flaperon. Veteran crash investigator Larry Vance believes the damage to its trailing edge could only have been caused by the force of water as it was crash-landed by a pilot.
The momentum of that, dragging that little flaperon through the water, would be absolutely enormous. The force of the water is really the only thing that could make that jagged edge that we see. It wasn't broken off. If it was broken off, it would be a clean break. You couldn't even break that thing. I know from experience that it's wide. If you wanted to break that off, you couldn't do it and make it look like that. That had to be eroded away.
If you have a hard time understanding how water could cut through a solid wing, take a look at this. Centimetres of solid metal cut like butter with nothing more than compressed water.
Today, that 2-metre component was boxed up and flown to France to be studied further.
Would you, if you were in charge of the investigation, have wanted that flaperon in Australia?
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
The ATSB's Peter Foley leads Australia's search for MH370, a search dependent on Malaysia's cooperation and honesty.
To read out the joint statement, please.
Why on earth have the French got this flaperon, and why isn't it with you guys, who are, after all, helping the Malaysians with the investigation?
It's a hard one, and perhaps one you should put to the French judicial authorities.
The investigation team have briefed us.
Incredibly, a year on from when the flaperon was discovered, Malaysia's Transport Minister admits his investigators still haven't been able to take possession of it.
So we are unable to get the details from the French government.
That's extraordinary, Minister. 1 year on from when that flaperon was recovered, you're telling us that you haven't received any information from the French?
No, this is under the ICUR investigation team.
Can I just check this, sir? You're avoiding the issue. Are you saying it wasn't a controlled ditching of the aircraft?
At the moment, we don't have any evidence to confirm that is controlled ditching.
Please. Can you tell us, sir, simply, have you been briefed on whether the flaperon indicates a controlled ditching? Yes or no?
That's not. We did not. We were not briefed on that details.
Ministers, if you will allow me, please, ladies and gentlemen.
The Malaysians shut down our questions, and we are trying to get an answer.
I understand your concerns, sir. I think Minister has.
I think it's been a frustration for the investigation.
It's now becoming clear that the damage to the flaperon does indicate a controlled ditching, which means there was very likely a pilot guiding the aircraft to the very end. This would cut across all the assumptions made in the search, as the ATSB's Peter Foley now admits for the first time.
We have also seen some analysis from the French that suggests that it's a possibility that it was in a deployed state.
Doesn't the visual evidence on the flaperon suggest that the flaperon was extended?
Yes.
And in a further stunning admission, Peter Foley concedes that if the plane was piloted, we may be looking in the wrong place. If there was a rogue pilot, it's possible, isn't it, that the plane was taken outside of the parameters of the existing search area?
Yeah, if you glided the plane or indeed controlled ditched the plane, it has an extended range potentially.
When the flaperon was found, then everybody should then have concluded, in my opinion, that this was a human engineered event.
There's no other explanation.
There's no other explanation.
And now, even more evidence to support the rogue pilot theory. A wing flap found on the coast of Tanzania and brought to Australia by the ATSB after Malaysia failed to recover it. I notice on the photographs of that flap there is the similar erosion on the trailing edge of the flap to what we also saw on the flaperon.
Correct. And we are looking to see whether or not we can work out whether that flap was extended at the end of flight. So in a sense your premise is right. I mean, we want to understand whether if we find that flap was extended at the end of flight, it suggests a different end of flight scenario.
If the flap was extended at the end of flight, it means, doesn't it, that there was somebody in charge of the aircraft?
Absolutely.
The data recovered from Captain Zahari's private flight simulator shows he simulated a route to the furthest reaches of the Southern Ocean. The physical evidence from the recovered wing parts suggests whoever was piloting the jet tried to keep it intact in a controlled ditching on water. Okay, Bruce, take us down.
Okay, now...
So we're right out over the ocean
we're
now.
Right over the ocean.
You can see the waves. You're at 2,000 feet.
Let's turn a little bit away. There's an island over there.
Bruce Margolis is a senior 777 pilot and instructor.
All right, I'm slowing down and we're going to start extending the flaps.
We're at 1,500 feet?
That's right. Our rate of descent's 2,000 feet a minute.
I cannot believe what we're about to do. In this 777 simulator, we asked him to try to land the jet on water and to keep it as intact as possible. 1,000 feet. Oh. What's going to hit first?
Probably the engines. The engines are going to hit first and they'll be ripped off.
And it's going to be a massive whack, is it?
The noise will be too terrible.
Is it hard to control the aircraft?
No, it's very easy to control the airplane. You can put your hands off.
Okay, this is it, Bruce. 100 feet, we're going in.
It's a horrible feeling. It's not easy to do.
40. Oh.
It's going probably into what they call ground effect.
I don't know about you, I find this very emotional, don't you?
Listen.
50, 40, 30, 20.
Bang, that's it, in the water.
If you've been able to land with as little impact as possible, the engines are ripped off.
Engines are ripped off.
But there's a good chance the fuselage is largely intact, isn't it?
It's possible. Very possible that.
It's going to fill with water and sink to the bottom.
Not necessarily immediately. It may, if it's still in one piece, it could actually float for a while, and then it'll start sinking.
Do you think that that plane is still largely intact somewhere on the bottom of the Indian Ocean?
I think that the fuselage certainly is intact. I think that the airplane is in big pieces for the most part, and is somewhere on the bottom of the Indian Ocean. Absolutely, it is.
There is the possibility that this plane was taken into the southern Indian Ocean by a suicidal pilot. What do you fear most about that scenario?
I fear that they were all still alive and trying to get in there, and they knew it was going on, that they became aware of it and that they were trying everything in their power to change the situation.
The last 28 months have been an ordeal for Danica Weeks and her boys, Lincoln and Jack, as it looks more likely that her husband Paul was the victim of a calculated mass murder. A conversation she had with the Malaysian Prime Minister's wife just a month after the tragedy has taken on a chilling significance. What did you say to her?
I said, find my husband. You need to find my husband. What are you doing? You need to do everything in your power to bring him home to us.
What did she say to you?
She told me that it was very horrible that someone would do this to 238 innocent people. She was insinuating the pilot took the plane.
It now seems likely that MH370 may never be found. That is surely tragedy enough and heartbreak to those left behind. That this tragedy may be compounded by, at the least, incompetence by the Malaysian authorities and, at worst, a possible cover-up is surely unforgivable. How important is it for your little boys that one day you can give them an answer about what happened to their dad?
That's extremely important. They deserve to know what happened to their father, not this never-ending aviation mystery of all time. It's their dad. And for Paul, for Lincoln and for Jack, I will keep fighting to do that and to give them the truth and the answer they deserve. We all deserve.
It's hard to believe that 10 years have passed since those first horrifying images of the doomed Twin Towers flashed onto our television screens. September 11, 2001. We watched hundreds of firefighters rush into the burning World Trade Center. Then we saw both buildings fall. The bravery was humbling, the tragedy overwhelming, and both were captured on film by two brothers, documentary makers who found themselves witnesses to history at ground zero. That they and their film came through the disaster was down to the bravery of one man, Fire Chief Joe Pfeiffer. 10 years on, their story of survival serves as a reminder of what that day delivered to the world. It's still the world's most famous city skyline, and it's hard to believe it's been 10 years since this.
Holy shit!
9/11, the day the world will never forget. The day New York's Twin Towers were reduced to rubble, killing 2,750 people. The day two brothers, Jules and Gideon Norday, miraculously survived, and with them, the only footage filmed from inside the collapsing towers.
Of all the things that you experienced, what stays with you most?
The horrible images. That lady burning alive. It's the remains of the jumpers.
And you, Gideon?
Yeah, like most people on that day, it would be the sound of a plane. It would be a particular smell, burning smell. Those kind of things, yeah, it just takes you right back.
French filmmakers, Jules and Gideon, were making a documentary on a Manhattan fire station, Engine 7, Ladder 1.
Because I think I'm the only guy that helps in this firehouse.
The shoot had been a documentary maker's nightmare, totally uneventful.
It's going to be a beautiful day today, sunshine throughout.
And the morning of September 11 was shaping up to being just the same. At 8:45 a.m, Jules was with Station Chief Joseph Pfeiffer, investigating a gas leak.
As they were milling around, checking to see the levels, I remember I was filming him
like that, and we hear this roar. So I look up, and in between I see that American airline flight, that close, that fast.
So by the time it goes behind this building...
Yeah, I literally have a second to turn the camera. It was going that fast that when I look this way, I film it, it goes straight into the tower.
So you see that bang, you see that fireball.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Horrible accident.
We have a number of floors on fire. It looked like the plane was aiming towards the building.
But Chief Pfeiffer saw it differently.
We knew right away, as soon as we saw the plane aim for the building, that this wasn't an accident, that this was a terrorist event.
Chief Pfeiffer and his crew, with Jules on board, would be the first to respond.
I remember telling myself to slow down. There's a million thoughts going through your mind, and it was like, slow down. What do I need to do next?
Joe Pfeiffer had spent nearly 30 years fighting fires, saving lives. But nothing could prepare him for what he, and especially Jules, were about to encounter.
The chief is putting his gear on. I asked him, Chief, can I come in with you? And he said, yes.
Yeah, you stay with me.
Never leave my side, stay with me. And as we enter the lobby, we hear screams, and just as I'm entering these revolving doors, right next to me is a person burning alive. But it was one of the images that kind of got seared into my mind, and also probably where I decided not to film, to censor myself.
With a look of disbelief, firefighters began to assemble in the lobby of the North Tower.
You don't have an elevator yet?
All of its 99 elevators were out, and horrifically, some people trapped 70 floors above were now jumping.
At first I thought it was debris fall, because the noise, it was almost like an explosion every time. And then I heard one of the firefighters who said, we've got jumpers.
That was telling you that this was a very serious situation, obviously.
It made it urgent that we needed to get up there to save those that were in their greatest moment of need and that were trapped above the fire. And that's what the firefighters saw, and that's what they did.
You saw a plane go into the plane, went straight into the building, right there into the side.
Several blocks away, Gideon Norday headed to the World Trade Center to look for his brother. On the way, filming stunned New Yorkers who, like him, could barely comprehend what they were seeing.
Like something out of the Tower Inferno, like a movie. I thought, damn, for the entire summer we were hoping for a fire, and suddenly remembering what the firefighters kept telling us, be careful what you wish for, because it might happen.
But Gideon arrives only to see a second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, slam into the South Tower.
Yes, I was really, really scared. I don't know why I didn't run. I was looking for Jules, that's why I didn't run. But otherwise, yes, I would have run very, very fast.
It hit the other tower.
What had been an horrific situation had now become catastrophic.
I was scared, and they were not, and that was incredible to see.
Did you ever consider leaving?
I don't think I did, actually. At first, I felt safe. The fire is 70 stories above me.
Actually, you shot it like you felt safe.
But yeah, and I'm surrounded by, it's like Superman, Captain America, all the, these guys, with their uniform. In a way, you feel like that. You feel safe, you feel protected.
You got a phone that's working?
But none of them had any notion of what was about to happen. Communications to those inside had completely broken down.
There are fire crews just screaming into this area.
Television viewers, even in Australia, knew more than Chief Pfeiffer about what was happening to those buildings.
We didn't receive anything. We didn't receive that the top 15 floors were glowing red, that the corners were starting to buckle, or the volume of fire upstairs. We didn't have that information, which put us at a great disadvantage.
In less than 2 hours from the first attack, both towers would collapse. First, the South Tower, the building next door to Chief Pfeiffer.
We thought maybe part of the plane fell from the roof and was crashing through the windows. We had no idea that an entire high-rise building just fell to the ground.
It sounded exactly like a train coming at high speed towards you. And then everyone starts running. So I just, follow the crowd, start running, turn the corner, start going up an escalator, and stopped and said, "What am I doing? Why am I running? Clearly, this is death coming for you." And I remember squatting down and made myself ready in a way. I said, "This is it." And then extremely quiet, nothing. And remember someone said, "Is everybody okay?"
Everybody all right? Yeah, I'm okay. All units, evacuate the building.
In the dust and confusion, Chief Pfeiffer finds a way out, but not out of danger.
Let's move! Come on, officer!
It wasn't long before they heard that freight train sound again. The North Tower was collapsing.
And there I realized, okay, that's what that sound means, and I start running. And after about 20 feet, I was like, what am I doing? Am I trying to outrun a 120-story building? It's ridiculous. So I jump in between two cars.
I can remember seeing Jules crouched behind a truck. He was there with his camera and a T-shirt. And as a typical firefighter, I have bunker gear on, so let me jump on top of him and protect him. It sounded like a good idea at the time, until I realized it was the steel crashing around us, and the entire street went completely black. And the noise of the firefighters talking on the radio went silent. It was a moment of wondering whether you were going to die or not. It was a moment of thinking of family.
Was that the first time you thought you could die?
Yeah, we were waiting really for just to be crushed by a piece of steel, because we were too close.
Get out of here.
And then the person on top of me gets up and says, "Okay, let's go." And I recognize it's Chief Pfeiffer, once again, who has, saved me.
Out of the dust emerged ghostly figures, including Gideon.
Holy shit.
He narrowly avoided being crushed himself.
And it was like those horror movie, catastrophe movie. You're looking up and you have literally a building falling on your head. Just at the time to run into a fire truck. And then waiting for the big chunk of building to land and crush me. But it never came.
Gideon returned to the fire station, still looking for Jules. But as the hours wore on, he began to fear the worst.
And it's only after probably 2 hours that you bastard, you finally showed up. And
that was quite a moment when you found each other.
Yes.
That Jules had survived when so many hadn't was incredible. That, he says, was because of one man, Chief Pfeiffer.
Oh, he's my hero. Chief Pfeiffer saved my life over and over, and I owe him the fact that I'm here right now.
There's no doubt that Chief Pfeiffer is a hero, but it is a label that sits most uncomfortably. He had to make a lot of decisions that day. One would ensure that Jules lived and that two brothers saw each other again. The other would cause Chief Pfeiffer eternal grief. Chief Pfeiffer's own brother Kevin, also a firefighter, was with him at the World Trade Center.
We looked at each other and there was a look of concern, wondering if neither one of us was going to be okay. And then I told him to go up, as I told the other firefighters, go up to the 70th floor and to evacuate people along the way. And I could remember him turning around, going to his firefighters, Engine 33, and walking upstairs, and that was the last time that I saw Kevin.
Kevin Pfeiffer was one of 343 firefighters who died that day. Men laden with gear who ran up the stairs of two burning buildings when everyone else was trying to escape.
What happened to firefighters that day?
Firefighters realized we weren't Superman, and Superman couldn't fly. We always think of ourselves as doing the impossible. And that day we realized we couldn't save everyone.
10 years on, and the site of the World Trade Center is still a massive construction zone. 2 large reflection pools have been built in the footprints of the towers. No one who is old enough to remember will ever forget the events of that day, least of all 2 French brothers.
The moment you're confronted by your own mortality, it has to change you, in different ways. I think for me it was realizing, that how precious life is, and I was engaged for a while with my fiancée, and we looked at each other that night and said, what are we waiting for? We're here, we're alive. What's the point of waiting? And got married a few months later.
And for you, Gideon?
Well, same. A few months later, I got divorced.
That's impressive. For Chief Pfeiffer, 9/11 has never ended. He now heads New York Fire Department's Counter-Terrorism Center. And he recognises the horror of that day wasn't confined to America.
See, that day, people died from 90 different countries. We all experienced it. If I asked what you were doing that day, I'm sure you could tell me exactly what you were doing, who you were with, and what you were feeling. I think we all felt that across the world. So 9/11 was really of the world coming together.
London is still in mourning. Now, true, the flags are not at half-mast and the city is functioning, but seemingly almost everybody is still sad and remorseful. And under this pall of sorrow, there's something else. Anger. Anger that the mother of a future king, someone so cherished and loved, outside the palace anyway, could be killed in this way. Now, it'll be months, maybe a year even, before the French authorities make their official reports. But as we've discovered, they'll have a tough job unravelling fact from fiction and piecing together the last hours of a princess. Shortly after midnight 3 weeks ago, a Mercedes limousine with 4 passengers sped through the streets of Paris. Following closely were some photographers on motorcycles pursuing a quarry they had hunted all day. We now know the driver was drunk and travelling too fast. As the car entered the tunnel under the Pont de l'Alma, there was an horrific crash, which echoed around the world.
We have been reporting this evening
Diana has been seriously injured in
Dodi Al-Fayed apparently was killed in the
The
crash.
accident occurred just after midnight.
Among the first on the scene were the photographers who had been chasing the speeding Mercedes. There is no doubt that while the dead and injured were still in the car, some of these men were taking close-up photographs.
I took pictures, yes.
How close did you get?
Oh, I must have been 20 or 30 meters away. I had a 200mm zoom lens and I took some general shots.
Laszlo Verez was one of the 10 photographers arrested by the police shortly after the crash. That's him in the back of this police bus as he was taken off for questioning. He now faces charges of manslaughter and failing to give assistance at the scene of an accident. Did any of your shots capture Diana in those moments just before she died?
I just got a glimpse of Diana as the police led me past the car, but I couldn't take any more photos. Then I saw Mr. Al-Fayed being given a cardiac massage. I walked very closely by, but I wasn't allowed to take any pictures.
For Diana, the morning of Saturday the 30th of August had begun in Sardinia, off the coast of Italy. She was on holiday, but not out of the public gaze. The paparazzi had been following her and her lover, Dodi Al-Fayed, for months. In the early afternoon, the couple boarded Dodi's father's private jet, bound for Paris. They arrived at Le Bourget, the airport reserved for VIP flights. If they had hoped to get away from the paparazzi, their hopes were in vain. The flight up from Sardinia to Paris was just under 2 hours, but somebody somewhere had tipped off the rats, as the Paris paparazzi are known, because when the Fayed plane touched down here at 3:20 in the afternoon, there were 20 of them waiting with their bikes and their scooters propped up against this fence. The photographers got their shots of Diana and Dodi leaving the plane, accompanied by bodyguards Trevor Rees-Jones and Kes Wingfield. Meeting them at the airport was Henri Paul, the acting security chief for the Fayed family's Ritz Hotel in Paris.
The party set off in a Mercedes in which the Princess and Dodi were, and there was a backup Range Rover which was driven by Henri Paul.
Michael Cole is spokesman for the Fayed family. His boss, Mohammed Al-Fayed, is the controversial owner of Harrods in London and also the Ritz Hotel in Paris, where Dodi and Diana plan to stop by.
Bike riders with photographers riding pillion came alongside and were snapping photographs of the Princess and Dodi inside. This went on for some time. The Princess remarked she was alarmed. She said, one of these people is going to kill themselves. It was so dangerous. And she was concerned not about herself, but about these paparazzi on motorcycles.
Now, there's no doubt that the Ritz is one of the world's most luxurious hotels. Dodi and Diana arrived here at about 4:30 and checked into the Imperial Suite overlooking the Place Vendôme. Now, if you're not the owner's son, the Imperial Suite costs $14,000 a night. At 6:30, Dodi kept an important appointment at this exclusive jewellery store across the square from the Ritz. He had managed to give the paparazzi the slip, and he went in unnoticed to Repossi's to pick up a ring he and Diana had chosen earlier. When was it that Dodi ordered the ring from you?
Yes, it was 10 days before the accident in Monte Carlo. They went to our main shop in Monte Carlo and the couple. So they asked us to give her the ring in Paris here in this shop.
So they selected it together. Was it her choice or his choice?
Her choice, I think, yes.
Were they engaged?
This is the thing. We shall never know. If this planet lasts for another 1,000 years, people will still be speculating about this. Dodi never commented about their relationship, nor did the princess. And I think it is a fact that their very reticence indicated to me the depth of the sincerity on both sides.
Around 7 o'clock, Dodi and Diana left the Ritz, headed for Dodi's apartment on the Champs-Élysées. Once again, the paparazzi didn't miss the opportunity. Dodi's apartment overlooks the Arc de Triomphe, and perhaps here the couple hoped to share a private moment. It wasn't to be. When they arrived, other photographers were already waiting. Everyone's wise after the event, but do you think it's possible that if the paparazzi had been massaged, they'd been given what they wanted, then they might have got out of the way and this not happened?
Well, it's interesting. One of the bodyguards who was with them, Kes Wingfield, has said very clearly that during that day they tried to reason with the paparazzi and say, please give them some space, please back off. And the response was, we're just doing our job, and if you want to make any trouble, we'll get some more people here, and then you'll really see something.
The couple had reserved a table for dinner at this romantic restaurant, but fearing they would be the object of the paparazzi's attention through the windows, they decided instead to return to the Ritz. Laszlo Verez followed them. Now, it's just 2 kilometres from Dodi's apartment down to the Ritz. Did you pull up alongside the car and take photographs?
Jamais. Jamais.
I followed behind, always behind, until we approached the Ritz. Then I went ahead of them so I could take pictures when they arrived.
The Ritz's security cameras show a group of photographers and tourists outside the entrance as Dodi and Diana return.
One of the last images we'll ever see of the princess is coming through her face coming through the swing doors, through the revolving doors, looking stressed by what had happened, and that her evening was being wrecked by these people. The bodyguards didn't go and confront these people. There was no point. They are not susceptible to reason. You can't ask them to be kind. They don't understand the concept of that. That's not what they're there for. They're there to make money. And they'll do it by any means at their command.
Alerted to the unexpected return of the couple to the Ritz, Acting Security Chief Henri Paul had also returned to the hotel, having gone off duty earlier at 7 o'clock. What we now know is that by the time the security camera captured him back in the hotel lobby, he had drunk the equivalent of a bottle and a half of wine. Home for Henri Paul was just 500 metres from the hotel down the Rue de Petit Champ. It's a grotty flat up on the 4th floor of that building. He was called back to the hotel by telephone at about 10 o'clock. And what he did in the intervening 3 hours to make himself so drunk is uncertain. But this is one of the bars that he frequented. Did you ever see him drunk here?
No, jamais.
Some bartenders in the area say that Henri Paul was not known as a heavy drinker. Never. But there are other reports that on that fateful night, Paul had visited this bar and had 2 or 3 whiskies. The Fayed family released this video to show that nothing in Henri Paul's behaviour suggested he was drunk when he returned to work. And bodyguard Kes Wingfield told an American interviewer he believed Paul was sober.
He was, laughing at the way I spoke French badly. He was as sober as a judge. There's nothing in his demeanour that suggested that he was in any way drunk. If there had been, I would have sent him home.
By 11 o'clock, a large crowd had gathered in front of the Ritz. Some of the paparazzi were surprised that Henri Paul came out of the hotel and started chatting with them.
Over the past 4 years, he had never talked to the photographers. It was weird. So I listened in, but he seemed totally incoherent. What seemed really strange is that he was talking about the stars.
Now, in your opinion, was he drunk?
In my opinion, he didn't seem drunk, but he was illuminated. His eyes were wide open, he was looking at the sky, he was wide awake. But he was somewhere else.
It was alleged that the hotel had been negligent, that this man was drunk as a pig and in a highly excitable state. Those were the headlines that went round the world. Now, perhaps he was, but could the hotel have known? Was Dodi reckless to get into a car driven by such a man? Well, on the evidence, for all intents and purposes, he appeared to be quite normal.
Around midnight, Dodi and Diana left the Imperial Suite, planning to sneak out the back door of the hotel and drive to Dodi's apartment. Henri Paul waited with the couple until a hired Mercedes arrived at 12:15. Then, joined by bodyguard Trevor Rhys-Jones, the four of them left together, only to discover that the photographers hadn't been fooled by their trick. With Henri Paul at the wheel, the Mercedes sped off down the one-way street. But it wasn't long before the paparazzi gave chase on motorcycles. The police believe the car reached speeds of over 150 kilometres an hour. Just how close the paparazzi kept to the Mercedes remains a matter of dispute. Some reports say they kept up with the car and even got in front of it. Others say they were left behind. What isn't in doubt is the tragic end to this chase.
Now we hear from Paris that there was a car in the tunnel, a Fiat Uno. Parts of it have been found on the floor, along with the Mercedes wing mirror, which apparently collided with it. But this car apparently has disappeared. Why? Why would anybody who had an innocent purpose in that underpass have disappeared?
Do you think that you and your colleagues chasing Dodi and Diana caused the crash?
Absolument pas. Absolument pas.
It's not the photographer's fault at all?
Non.
No, because we were not there. We didn't cause the accident. The driver was drunk. He was not himself. No one in his right mind would go this fast in Paris. And nobody is allowed to do that.
But he wasn't going for a quiet drive along the river. He was being chased by you, the paparazzi, and your colleagues.
On sait pas. On ne sait pas. On ne sait pas.
We don't know that. We don't know that. It's easy to say, but no one knows. Maybe he did it to show off in front of his boss.
On sait pas.
The fact is that I can say that I haven't changed in my firm belief that this would not have happened but for the unwarranted and unnecessary and unwelcome harassment that these people suffered in their last day together, throughout their last day together in Paris.
But Laszlo, she didn't invite you to take these photographs, these images of her that you stole when she was on holidays. These ones, these are all photographs that you stole.
Yes, but I was invited.
Ça, c'est un rendez-vous.
Look at
Elle s'est
these.
mis exprès.
Were you invited to take this?
She knew we were there. She did it on purpose. She knew perfectly well the photographers were there.
Well, she's holidaying with the family.
Tout ça, c'est à côté.
She
Tout ça,
didn't
ça se passe à
invite you to
côté des
take that.
photographes. Tout ça, ça se passe à côté des photographes. Elle le sait.
It
Elle le
did
fait
not
exprès.
happen by
C'est pas des photos volées, ça.
But you'd made Diana's life miserable by harassing her over the years.
C'est faux. C'est complètement faux.
It's completely wrong. For years, she stole photographers where she'll be. When you are this famous, people are wanting to see photos of you. So maybe sometime photographers took pictures she didn't like. But that is the price you pay for fame.
De popularité.
So this was all her fault, was it?
Bah oui. À mon avis, oui.
Could I suggest to you that the attention Diana got from the paparazzi is part of the price of fame in our society?
Nobody has to live their life with these pressures constantly in mind. Why should anyone have to carry on and conduct their everyday existence worrying about these pestilential parasites
When Prince Charles and Diana's sisters arrived in Paris to take her body back to London, their faces told the story. But it was a week later, at her funeral, that Diana's brother put their feelings into words.
It is a point to remember that of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this: a girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age.